My name is Rania. I am 21 years old. And on March 15th, 2023, I was supposed to die. Not in a car accident. Not from illness. I was scheduled to be executed by beheading in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, for the crime of apostasy, abandoning Islam. But that's not even the strangest part of my story. The strangest part is how I ended up on death row in the first place. You see, 3 months earlier, I was a Saudi princess living in a palace with marble floors imported from Italy and gold fixtures in every bathroom. I had never worked a day in my life. I had servants who anticipated my every need before I even spoke it. And on my 19th birthday, my father, a man I had spent my entire life trying to please, told me I was going to become my uncle's second wife. My uncle, a man 33 years older than me, a man I had called Uncle Khalid my entire childhood, a man who already had a wife and 4 children. If you think you know where the story is going, I promise you, you have no idea. Because what happened next didn't just change my life. It defied everything I thought was possible. Everything I thought I knew about God, about power, about freedom. And if you stay with me until the end of a story, you'll understand why I'm risking everything, even now, to tell it. But first, let me take you back. Back to the moment everything shattered. It was July 23rd, 2022. My 19th birthday. The dining hall in our family compound was decorated with white orchids flown in from Thailand that morning. The table, a custom piece of mahogany that seated 24 people, was covered with more food than 50 people could eat. Lamb seasoned with saffron that costs more per gram than gold. Dates stuffed with pistachios and honey. Rice cooked with rose water and cardamom. Every dish a work of art. Every bite a reminder of our wealth. I sat in my designated seat, exactly 4 chairs away from my father, as tradition demanded. My mother sat even farther, nearly at the opposite end, her face partially covered by her shayla, even though we were in our private family space. That's how it worked in our world. Proximity to my father indicated your value. And women, no matter how royal their blood, were always kept at a distance. My father stood, and the room fell silent immediately. When a man of his position speaks, even the air seems to hold its breath. He smiled, a rare thing, and I actually felt hope flutter in my chest like a trapped bird. Maybe he was going to tell me I could continue my studies abroad. Maybe he was going to announce something wonderful. "Rania," he said, his voice formal, almost rehearsed, "you have brought honor to our family by your obedience and your devotion to our traditions. Today you become a woman, and as a woman of royal blood, you have a sacred duty to strengthen the bonds of our family." I remember feeling confused. Sacred duty? What did that mean? "It is my honor," he continued, "to announce that you have been promised in marriage to my brother, Khalid. The engagement is finalized. The mahr has been agreed upon. The wedding will take place in 4 months' time, on November 18th. The room erupted in polite applause. I heard my aunts ululating, that high-pitched celebratory sound that Arab women make at weddings and joyous occasions. But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I stared at my father, waiting for him to laugh, to say it was a joke. But he wasn't joking. His face was serious, proud even. I turned my head slowly to the left, where my Uncle Khalid sat just 3 seats away from my father. He was watching me, not with the eyes of an uncle, not with familial warmth. He was watching me the way a man watches something he has just purchased. His lips curved into a small smile. And in that moment, I wanted to die. Have you ever had a moment where your entire reality shatters? Where everything you thought was solid ground turns out to be nothing but ice, and you're falling through? That's what it felt like. Because I realized, in that suffocating second, that I had never been a person to my family. I had been an asset, a bargaining chip, a beautiful object to be traded when the timing was right. Uncle Khalid already had a wife, Aunt Nora, a kind woman I had known since childhood. She had given him 4 children. But in our world, that didn't matter. Powerful men took second, third, even 4th wives to consolidate power, to strengthen family alliances, to display their wealth. And I was a sacrifice on that altar. That night, alone in my bedroom, a space bigger than most people's entire homes, with a 4-poster bed draped in silk and a balcony overlooking private gardens, I stood in front of my floor-length mirror, and I didn't recognize myself. I was wearing a designer nightgown that cost more than a car. My hair, freshly styled by my personal attendant, fell in perfect waves down my back. My skin, pampered with products made from gold and caviar, glowed under the chandelier light. I was a princess. I was beautiful. I was valuable. And I was absolutely worthless, because none of it mattered. Not the wealth, not the status, not the royal blood running through my veins. I was still just a piece of property to be handed from one man to another. I walked out onto my balcony and stared at the night sky. Riyadh at night is a strange contradiction. Glittering towers of glass and steel rising from desert sand, luxury cars worth millions driving on roads where, until recently, women weren't even allowed to drive. I could see the city lights stretching for miles, each one representing someone's life, someone's dreams. And I thought, out there, somewhere are women who are free. Women who choose their own husbands. Women who say no and are actually heard. But I was locked in a golden cage. And the worst part, I had been taught my entire life that this cage was a blessing. That my only purpose was to be obedient. That questioning my fate was the same as questioning Allah himself. So I did what I had always done. I went back inside. I performed my ritual washing, wudu, carefully cleaning my hands, face, and feet in the prescribed manner before the late-night prayer. I spread my prayer rug toward Mecca. I bowed. I prostrated. I recited the words I had memorized since childhood. And I felt absolutely nothing. Let me ask you something. Have you ever gone through the motions of faith while your soul was screaming in silence? Have you ever prayed to a God you're not sure is even listening? That was my life. 5 times a day, every day, for as long as I could remember, I performed the Salah, the Islamic prayer. I fasted during Ramadan. I wore the abaya and niqab in public, my entire body covered except my eyes. I memorized Quranic verses. I never questioned. I never doubted, at least not out loud. But deep inside, in a place I didn't even want to acknowledge, there was a question that had been growing since I was a little girl. If Allah loves me, why do I feel so empty? If this is a straight path, why does it feel like I'm walking through darkness? The next 3 months were a nightmare wrapped in wedding preparations. Dress fittings with designers flown in from Paris. Jewelry selections, diamonds and emeralds that cost more than most people earn in a lifetime. Guest lists that read like a who's who of Gulf royalty. To my mother, who I desperately wanted to confide in, seemed almost relieved that I was being taken care of. "You're very fortunate, Rania," she told me one afternoon while we reviewed floral arrangements. "Your uncle is a good man. You'll want for nothing." I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and ask her, "Is this what you wanted for me? Is this what you dreamed for your daughter?" But I knew the answer. She had been raised the same way I had. This was normal. This was expected. This was honor. Uncle Khalid, I couldn't bring myself to think of him any other way. Even though I was expected to start calling him something more intimate, began visiting our home more frequently. He would sit in the majlis with my father, drinking cardamom coffee and discussing business. Sometimes he would request my presence. I would enter, fully covered, eyes downcast as was proper. He would ask me polite questions. How were my studies? Did I enjoy poetry? What was my favorite cuisine? All of it felt like an interview. An inspection. I was being evaluated, and I had no choice but to pass. After one of these visits, about 6 weeks before the wedding, he gave me a gift. A Cartier bracelet, encrusted with diamonds, worth probably $100,000. My father beamed with pride. "You see how generous he is?" I looked at that bracelet and all I could think was, this is the price of my life. And I'm not worth any more than this. Here's what I need you to understand. In that moment, I didn't know there was another option. I had been so thoroughly conditioned, so completely shaped by my culture, that I genuinely believed I had only 2 choices: obey and live, or disobey and bring unspeakable shame on my family. The thought of escape seemed as impossible as flying to the moon with my bare hands. Where would I go? I had no money of my own, no passport, my father controlled that, no skills to support myself. I had been educated, yes, but only in subjects deemed appropriate for a woman of my status. Literature, art history, languages, nothing practical, nothing that could actually save me. I was a bird raised in a cage who had never learned to fly. And even if I somehow escaped, Where would I go in a country where a woman cannot travel without a male guardian's permission? Where a woman who runs away from her family can be hunted down and returned, or worse. So I began to accept my fate. I stopped crying at night. I stopped questioning. I became numb, obedient, compliant, the perfect Saudi bride. But God, and I didn't know it then, but it wasn't all I'm talking about. God had other plans. It was a Tuesday afternoon, about 7 weeks before the wedding. The interior designer had just left after spending 3 hours showing me fabric swatches for the bedroom I would share with Uncle Khalid in his compound. I felt sick to my stomach and told my attendants I needed to rest. I went to one of the guest suites in our palace. We had 12 of them, and lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling, counting the intricate patterns in the plasterwork. Anything to not think about my future. I don't know what made me open the nightstand drawer. Boredom, maybe. Curiosity. Or perhaps something else. Something I now recognize as divine intervention. Inside the drawer, underneath some hotel-style notepads and pens, was a book. A small, leather-bound book with gold lettering on the cover. I pulled it out and my heart nearly stopped. It was a Bible. In English. The Holy Bible, New Testament. I should have closed that drawer immediately. Possession of non-Islamic religious texts was forbidden in our home. It was dangerous, if anyone found me with this. But I didn't close the drawer. Instead, I opened the book. My hands were shaking. Why was I so nervous? It was just a book, just words on paper. But it felt forbidden in a way that made my pulse race. I later learned that one of the British designers who had worked on our palace months earlier must have left it by accident. Or maybe not by accident. Maybe he left it on purpose, hoping someone would find it. I started reading. I don't even remember what page I opened to, but it was somewhere in the Gospel of John. The words were in English. I had been educated in English at an international school, so I could read it easily. But understanding the words and feeling their impact were two completely different things. I read about Jesus. I had heard of Isa in the Quran. Muslims believed Jesus was a prophet, nothing more. But this was different. This Jesus spoke with authority. This Jesus touched lepers. This Jesus defended women. And then I came to a passage that made me freeze. It was John chapter 8, the story of the woman caught in adultery. The religious leaders brought her to Jesus, ready to stone her to death according to the law. They wanted to trap Jesus, to see if he would uphold the law or show mercy. And Jesus said, "Let him who is without sin cast the first stone." I read that sentence 3 times. Let him who is without sin cast the first stone. The men walked away. All of them. Because none of them were sinless. And then Jesus turned to the woman, this woman who everyone wanted to kill, this woman who had been caught in the worst possible sin according to religious law, and he said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." I closed the book. My hands were trembling, so hard I almost dropped it. Something inside my chest felt like it was cracking open. Because in that moment, I realized something I had never even considered before. I had spent my entire life around men who condemned, men who judged, men who controlled, men who used religion as a weapon to keep women in chains. But this Jesus defended a woman who deserved death according to the law. This Jesus saw her as a person. This Jesus offered her freedom. Could you imagine finding a message like that when you're drowning? When you've given up hope? That's what it felt like. Like someone had thrown me a rope in the darkness. I knew I should put the book back. I knew I should forget I ever saw it. But I couldn't. Instead, I did something incredibly dangerous. I hid it under my mattress. And that night, after everyone in the palace was asleep, I pulled it out and I read by the light of my phone. I read about Jesus healing the sick. I read about Jesus feeding the hungry. I read about Jesus welcoming children. I read about Jesus touching the untouchable. And I read about how he treated women. With Mary and Martha, he sat and taught them as disciples, something no rabbi did. With the Samaritan woman at the well, he spoke to her in public despite every cultural taboo. With Mary Magdalene, he appeared to her first after his resurrection, making a woman the first witness to the most important event in history. Every story made the crack in my chest grow wider, because I began to see the difference. In Islam, I had been taught that women were worth half of a man. Our testimony in court was worth half. Our inheritance was half. We needed a male guardian. We were told to lower our gaze, to cover ourselves, to make ourselves small and invisible so that men wouldn't be tempted. We were responsible for men's sin. We were the problem. But in these pages, in these stories about Jesus, women were seen. Women were valued. Women were loved, not for their obedience, not for their silence, but simply because they were human beings created in the image of God. Do you understand what that did to me? Can you imagine what it feels like to discover at 19 years old that you might actually matter? Not because of your father's status, not because of your beauty, not because of your usefulness to men, but just because you exist? Over the next 2 weeks, I read that Bible every single night. I finished the entire New Testament. I read it desperately, hungrily, like someone who had been starving their entire life and just discovered food. I read about Jesus saying, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." I read about him saying, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." I read about him dying on a cross, something the Quran explicitly denies, for the sins of the world. And then, most impossibly, rising from the dead 3 days later. I didn't know if I believed it. How could I? I had been Muslim my entire life. My family, my identity, my entire world was built on Islam. Leaving Islam was apostasy. Apostasy was punishable by death. This wasn't theoretical. This was law. People had been executed for less. But late at night, when I was alone with those pages, when I read Jesus' words, something in my soul responded in a way it never had to any Quranic verse. It felt like waking up, like seeing color for the first time, like breathing after being underwater. And then came the dream. It was October 29th, 2022. 3 weeks before my forced wedding. I had cried myself to sleep that night because the final wedding dress fitting had happened that day, and seeing myself in that white gown, a gown worth more than most people's homes, made me feel like I was looking at my own corpse. I fell asleep still in tears, and then I was somewhere else. I was standing in a desert. Not the desert around Riyadh. This was different. Endless. Beautiful. The sand was gold in a way that seemed to glow from within. The sky was so blue it almost hurt to look at. And standing in front of me was a man. He was wearing simple white robes. His face, I can't even describe his face. It was the kind of face that made you want to weep and laugh at the same time. The kind of face that somehow felt more real than anything I had ever seen in my waking life. He smiled at me, and when he spoke, his voice was everything. Thunder and whisper, power and gentleness, authority and love. "Rania," he said, and hearing him say my name made me fall to my knees. "I see you, Rania, not as property, not as a bargaining chip. I see you as my daughter. You are worth more than rubies and royal blood. You are precious to me, not because of what you can offer, not because of what you can do, but simply because I created you. I formed you. I know every hair on your head. I know every tear you've cried in the dark. I know every silent scream. And I love you." I was sobbing. Uncontrollable, gut-wrenching sobs. "Follow me," he said, extending his hand toward me, "and I will set you free, not just from this marriage, from every chain you've ever worn, chains you don't even know you're carrying. Follow me, and you will know what it means to truly live." I reached for his hand. The moment my fingers touched his, light exploded around us. So bright, so warm, so completely overwhelming that I woke up. I sat up in my bed, gasping for air, my face wet with tears, my heart pounding like I had just run a marathon. My room was dark, silent, empty, but I could still feel it. That warmth, that presence, that love. I knew, with every fiber of my being, that it hadn't been just a dream. It had been a visitation. Jesus, not Isa the prophet, but Jesus the Son of God, had come to me, a Muslim girl locked in a Saudi palace. Let me ask you, what would you do? If God himself showed up in your darkest moment and offered you freedom, what would you do? Would you have the courage to say yes, knowing what it might cost? I sat in that bed for hours, until the call to far prayer echoed from the mosque loudspeakers across the city, and I knew exactly what I had to do. The next morning, I woke up different. I can't explain it any other way. I had gone to bed a terrified, hopeless girl. I woke up as someone who had been seen by God, really seen. and something in me that had been broken my entire life suddenly felt whole. I didn't tell anyone. How could I? But over the next week, I read the Bible with new eyes. I read it not as a curious observer, but as someone who was being called. And then one night, it was November 4th, exactly 2 weeks before my wedding, I did something that would change everything. I locked myself in my walk-in closet. It was the only space in my room that had no windows, no cameras, no possibility of being overheard. I knelt down on the plush carpet among designer shoes I had never even worn and handbags worth tens of thousands of dollars. And surrounded by all that wealth, all that privilege, all that emptiness, I prayed. But not to Allah. I prayed to Jesus. Jesus, I whispered, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't know the right words. I don't know how this works. But if what I read is true, if what I saw in that dream was real, if you really died for me and rose again, if you really see me as your daughter, then I want to follow you. I believe you are who you say you are. I believe you are Lord. I believe you can set me free. Save me, please. I can't do this wedding. I can't live this life. If I have to die for you, I'll die. But I can't keep living like this. I choose you. I stayed there on my knees, crying, for nearly an hour. And then the strangest thing happened. Peace. Not happiness. I wasn't happy. My circumstances hadn't changed. I was still going to be forced to marry my uncle in 2 weeks. But I felt peace. Deep, unshakable, supernatural peace. Like someone had wrapped a warm blanket around my soul. I went to sleep that night, and for the first time in months, I didn't have nightmares. But here's the thing about following Jesus in a place like Saudi Arabia. It's not just spiritually dangerous. It's literally illegal. Apostasy, leaving Islam, is a capital crime. And I had just committed it in my heart. I knew I couldn't tell anyone. I knew I had to keep pretending. I kept wearing my hijab. I kept performing the prayers. I kept pretending to be the obedient Muslim daughter. But inside, everything was different. I started praying to Jesus in my head while I bowed toward Mecca. I started reading the Bible on my phone using an encrypted app. I started memorizing verses. My favorite became John 8 verse 36. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. Free indeed. I clung to those words like a life raft. Because I still had no plan. No escape route. No idea how Jesus was going to fulfill his promise to set me free. The wedding was 9 days away. Then 7. Then 5. My life was a countdown to my own execution, even though no one else saw it that way. And then everything fell apart. It was November 12th, 6 days before the wedding. I had gotten careless. That's the truth. I had been reading the Bible on my phone late at night, and I fell asleep without closing the app. When I woke up the next morning, my phone was on my nightstand, screen dark. I didn't think anything of it. But Lena, my Filipino attendant, the woman who had served me for 3 years, the woman I had trusted with my life, had come in early to wake me. She had picked up my phone to move it to the charger, and the screen had lit up. She saw what I had been reading. I found out later that she immediately panicked. She was a Christian herself, Catholic from Manila. She had been working in Saudi Arabia for 6 years, sending money back to her family. She lived in fear every single day that someone would discover her faith. She had a secret Bible hidden in her room. She attended underground church services in private homes. She knew the risk. And when she saw that I, a Saudi princess, had been reading the Bible, she made a calculation. If anyone found out that she knew and didn't report it, she would be accused of corrupting me. She would be arrested, possibly executed. Her family back home would lose their only source of income. So she did what she thought she had to do to survive. She told my father. I'll never forget that afternoon. I was in the main sitting room, reviewing seating charts for the wedding reception, when my father walked in. His face was stone. Behind him were 2 of his personal guards. Behind them was Uncle Khalid. Behind them was our family's imam, Sheikh Rahman. And behind all of them, weeping, was Lena. Stand up, my father said. His voice was quiet. That was somehow worse than if he had been yelling. I stood. My legs were shaking. Is it true? He asked. Is what true? I tried to keep my voice steady. He took 2 steps forward and backhanded me across the face. I had never been hit in my life. The shock was worse than the pain. Do not lie to me, he said. Lena has informed me that you have been reading the Christian Bible, that you have been studying their false religion. Is this true? The room was spinning. I touched my face where he had hit me. I tasted blood, and in that moment, I had a choice. I could lie. I could deny it. I could say Lena was mistaken, that I had been doing research for a school project, that I had been trying to understand Christianity to better argue against it. I could save myself. But then I remembered Jesus' words, "Whoever denies me before men, I will also deny before my Father in heaven." And I remembered the dream, the hand extended toward me, the promise of freedom. I lifted my head. I looked my father in the eyes. And I said, "Yes." The word hung in the air like a grenade. "Yes," I said again, stronger this time. "I've been reading the Bible, and I believe it. I believe Jesus is the Son of God. I believe he died for my sins and rose from the dead. I believe he is Lord, not Allah, Jesus." My Uncle Khalid lunged forward. For a second I thought he was going to kill me right there. But my father held up his hand, stopping him. "You have destroyed this family," my father said. His voice was shaking now, not with anger, with something worse. Grief, disgust. "You have brought shame that can never be washed away. You are no longer my daughter." Those words should have devastated me. In our culture, being disowned by your father is worse than death. You become nothing. No one. Erased. But instead, I felt that peace again. That same supernatural peace I had felt in my closet. "I understand," I said quietly. The Imam stepped forward. "You will recant," he said. "You will declare the Shahada right now. You will affirm that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet. You will beg forgiveness. You will marry Khalid as planned. You will spend the rest of your life in repentance. And perhaps Allah will have mercy on you." I looked at him. This man who had taught me Quranic verses when I was a child. This man who had always seemed so kind. "No," I said. "I won't. I can't deny Jesus. I won't." The room erupted. Uncle Khalid was shouting. The Imam was shouting. My father was shouting. Guards were called. And within an hour, I was no longer in my palace bedroom. I was in a locked room with bars on the windows. A prisoner in my own home. I spent 3 days in that room. No phone. No books. No contact with anyone except a guard who brought me food twice a day. Food I could barely eat. I prayed constantly. "Jesus, you promised to set me free. Jesus, I trust you. Jesus, I'm scared. Jesus, help me." On the 3rd day, my father came to see me. He sat across from me in the small room, looking older than I had ever seen him look. "Rania," he said, and his voice was almost gentle. "Almost. I want to give you one more chance. Recant this madness. Marry Khalid. Live quietly. No one outside our family needs to know what happened. Your shame can stay hidden." "I can't," I said. "You can," he insisted. "You're choosing death over life. You're choosing this foreign god over your family." "I'm choosing truth," I said. "I'm choosing freedom." He stood up. "Then you're choosing death. I will file charges of apostasy with the religious court. You will be tried. You will be found guilty. And you will be executed. The blood will be on your own hands." He walked out, and I knew he meant it. 2 days later, I was transferred to a maximum security women's prison in Riyadh. The contrast from my palace to that cell was almost incomprehensible. I went from marble floors and silk sheets to concrete and a thin mat on a metal bench. I went from servants and luxury to prison guards and strip searches. I went from a princess to prisoner number 4712. The trial happened fast. In Saudi Arabia, there's no separation between religious law and state law. Sharia is the legal system. The trial was held in a religious court. My father testified against me. Uncle Khalid testified against me. Even Lena was brought in to testify. She could barely look at me, tears streaming down her face, but she confirmed what she had seen. The judge asked me one question. "Do you affirm that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet?" "No," I said. "I affirm that Jesus Christ is Lord." The verdict was immediate. Death by beheading. Execution scheduled for March 15th, 2023. For months away. Those 4 months in prison were the strangest of my life. I should have been terrified every second. And sometimes I was. But mostly, I felt close to Jesus in a way I never had before. I had nothing. No distractions. No wealth. No status. No family. No friends. Nothing but a concrete cell and a God I had chosen to follow. And he met me there. I don't know how else to explain it. In that cell, I felt his presence like I had never felt it in my palace. I would wake up in the middle of the night and feel like someone was sitting beside me. I would pray and feel like he was actually listening. I would read the words of the Bible that I had memorized. I had no physical Bible anymore, and they would come alive in my mind. I thought about martyrs. I thought about Stephen being stoned. I thought about Peter being crucified upside down. I thought about thousands of believers throughout history who had chosen death rather than denying Christ. And I realized I was about to join them. And I was okay with that. Because even if I died, I was free. More free in that cell than I had ever been in my palace. Because freedom isn't about where you are. It's about whose you are. As the weeks passed, I met other women in the prison. Women accused of adultery. Women accused of sorcery. Women who had tried to escape abusive husbands. Women whose only crime was being born female in a country that treated them as less than human. I told them about Jesus. I shared the gospel with anyone who would listen. Some thought I was crazy, but others listened. One woman, Fatima, prayed with me to accept Christ 2 weeks before my execution date. She whispered, "If you can be this peaceful facing death, your God must be real." That gave me more joy than anything I had ever experienced in my old life. My execution was scheduled for dawn on March 15th. The night of March 14th was the longest night of my life. I couldn't sleep. I paced my small cell. I prayed. I sang hymns I had learned from YouTube videos I had watched in secret. Amazing grace. How great thou art. It is well with my soul. That last one felt especially meaningful. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. Was it well with my soul? I was 19 years old. I was about to die. I would never marry for love, never have children, never see the world, never grow old. But yes, it was well with my soul, because I knew Jesus, and I knew that when they cut off my head, I would open my eyes in paradise. At 2:47 a.m., I was lying on my mat, staring at the ceiling, praying quietly, and then the cell filled with light, not the harsh fluorescent lights from the hallway. This was different. This was warm, bright. It didn't hurt my eyes, even though it was brilliant. It was like the sun had somehow come inside my cell. I sat up, my heart pounding. Jesus, I whispered, and then I felt it. Hands, invisible hands, resting on my forehead. The touch was so gentle, so tender, like how a father touches his beloved daughter. And I heard his voice, not audibly, I didn't hear it with my ears, but I heard it in my spirit, clearer than any physical sound. Stand up, Rania. I am setting you free. Walk in faith. I have opened the way. I stood up. My legs were shaking. The light was still filling the cell. The door. I said out loud, barely breathing. I walked to the cell door. It was solid steel, electronically locked, requiring biometric identification and a security code. It had been checked by the guards just an hour earlier. I reached out and touched the door handle. It turned. The door swung open. Just like that. I stood there, frozen in shock. This wasn't possible. This was a maximum security prison. Doors don't just open. I stepped out into the corridor. There were supposed to be 6 guards on duty at night. I could see them. All 6 of them. Slumped in their chairs. Eyes closed. Breathing slowly and evenly. They weren't dead. They were sleeping. All of them. At the same time. In a high-security prison, where sleeping on duty is a fireable offense. I walked past them. None of them stirred. I kept expecting someone to wake up, to shout, to grab me. But nothing. It was like I was invisible. I walked through 3 more corridors. Every door I touched opened. Electronic locks that should have required codes and key cards simply clicked open at my touch. Every guard I passed was sleeping. Some were slumped over desks. Others were standing but leaning against walls, eyes closed, utterly unconscious. I reached the final checkpoint, the main exit. This door was different. It required 3 different security measures: a code, a keycard, and a retinal scan. There was no way. I put my hand on the door, and it opened. Just opened. Like I had every right to walk out. And so I did. I walked out of that prison into the cool night air of Riyadh at 3:14 a.m. on March 15, 2023. The stars above me had never looked so bright. I stood there for a second, not knowing what to do, not knowing where to go. And then I saw a car, an old, beat-up sedan, parked right in front of the prison entrance with the engine running. A man was sitting in the driver's seat. He rolled down the window. "Rania," he said in accented Arabic. I nodded, still unable to speak. "Get in. Quickly. We don't have much time." I got in the car. I had no idea who this man was. I had no idea if I was jumping from one danger into another. But Jesus had told me to walk in faith, so I walked. We drove through Riyadh in silence for about 10 minutes. Finally, the man spoke. "My name is Marcus. I'm part of an underground network of believers. We help people like you escape. We received word 2 hours ago that you needed extraction. We didn't know how you would get out of the prison, but we were told to be ready. So here I am." "Who told you?" I asked. He smiled. "That's between them and God. All you need to know is that you're safe now. Or you will be, once we get you out of the country." Over the next 6 hours, I was passed from Marcus to another believer, then to another. A network I didn't even know existed. Christians living in secret in Saudi Arabia, risking their lives to help people escape persecution. By nightfall, I was in Jordan. Within a week, I was in Turkey. Within a month, I was in Europe, where I applied for asylum as a Christian fleeing religious persecution. That was 2 years ago. I'm 21 now. I live in a country I can't name for security reasons. I have a new name legally, but Rania is who I am in my heart. I work with an organization that helps women escape forced marriages and religious persecution in the Middle East. In the last 2 years, we've successfully helped 40 women get to safety. 40 women who were in situations like mine. Some are facing forced marriages. Some are facing honor killings. Some had converted to Christianity and were in danger. 40 women who are now free because Jesus set me free first. I'll never see my family again. According to them, I'm already dead. I can never go back to Saudi Arabia. If I do, I'll be arrested and executed immediately. My old life is gone. Every bit of it. The wealth, the palace, the status, the servants, the luxury, all of it, gone. And I wouldn't trade my life now for 1,000 palaces. Because I'm free. Actually free. Free to worship Jesus without hiding. Free to read the Bible openly. Free to pray out loud. Free to tell my story. Free to help other women find freedom. This is the freedom Jesus promised. Not freedom from difficulty. My life is harder now in many ways. I work a regular job. I live in a small apartment. I worry about money sometimes. But I'm free. Free in my soul. Free in my spirit. Free to be who God created me to be. Let me ask you something. What's holding you captive right now? Maybe it's not a forced marriage. Maybe it's not a physical prison. But what are the chains in your life? Is it fear? Fear of what others will think? Fear of losing status? Fear of being rejected by your family? Is it addiction? Is it a toxic relationship you can't seem to leave? Is it bitterness or unforgiveness that's eating you alive? Is it shame from your past? Is it a lie you've believed about yourself, that you're not worthy, not valuable, not lovable? Jesus said, "The truth will set you free." Not religion, not rules, not rituals. The truth. And the truth is this: Jesus loves you. Not because of what you can do for him. Not because of how good you are. Not because you have your life together. He loves you because he created you. He formed you. He knows everything about you. Every secret, every sin, every shame, and he still loves you. He died on a cross to pay for your sins. He rose from the dead to give you new life. And he's offering you the same thing he offered me in that dream. His hand. Freedom. Real freedom. The kind that sets your soul free even if your circumstances don't change immediately. Will you take his hand? I'm not going to ask you to click subscribe right now, even though I'd love for you to, because I want this video to reach as many people as possible. But I am going to ask you this: if you're watching this and you feel that tug in your heart, that whisper in your spirit that says, "This is real. This is true. This is what I've been looking for. Don't ignore it." That's Jesus calling you. The same Jesus who appeared to me in a dream. The same Jesus who opened impossible doors. The same Jesus who has been with me every single day since I said yes to him. He's calling you right now. And your yes doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't have to be facing execution. You don't have to be in a prison cell. You just have to be honest. Tell him, "Jesus, I need you. I believe you died for me. I believe you rose again. I want to follow you. Set me free." That's it. That's how it starts. And then, day by day, he'll lead you into more freedom than you ever thought possible. I'm living proof. A Saudi princess who should have died in March 2023 is instead alive, free, and helping 40 other women find the same freedom. If Jesus can do that for me, what can he do for you? Don't wait. Don't put it off. Don't tell yourself you'll get your life together first. Come to him right now, right where you are. He's been waiting for you. And if this testimony touched your heart, please share it. Someone in your life needs to hear this. Someone is trapped right now the way I was. And maybe, just maybe, this video will be the key that unlocks their chains. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more testimonies like mine. And leave a comment below, I read them all. Tell me, what's one chain you want Jesus to break in your life? Let's pray for each other. Because that's what the body of Christ does. We carry each other. We fight for each other's freedom. The same God who freed me is ready to free you. The question is, are you ready to say yes?